Good evening and welcome to episode 21 of the Above Average Joe's podcast. I'm Kyle as always, and with me is Heath and Matt. How you fellas doing this week?
Pretty dang okay.
Living the dream and not too bad. Where are you going, Matt? Matt, he's moving. Oh, there he is. Oh, look at. He's decided to join us.
It's just I'm backwards, so it depends on how I move it.
Ah.
It's always wrong.
So everybody had a decent weekend. It was nice weather.
Busy. I did some shingling on my roof.
Nice.
Long time till I should have done it a few years ago, but whatever. Got it done. The 13-year-old came up with me, worked like a champ.
Wow.
He loved it up there. Yeah, he did good.
He's still young enough to be excited to work with Dad?
Actually, you know what? He really likes a lot of the hands-on stuff, so it really doesn't bother him to do stuff. Like, he's more interested in why are you doing that? So it's sort of like going backwards in time a little bit to when he was 5, and you get the why. But he's genuinely interested. He wants to know how it's done. So I let him line up a lot of the shingles and pound a lot of the nails, and away he went. So I did all the cuts and I did most of the stripping, but not that kind of stripping, boys. Hey, I know what you're thinking.
Nah, I think you were thinking it.
I know you're thinking about penis.
Well, the whole neighborhood has to see it, right?
So,
from the rooftops.
Anyway. What do we got on today's show there, Heath?
A few little things. We did a pretty in-depth show last week on a subject. So there's a couple of things we never really touched on that I kind of still feel we need to. Okay. The WHL Bantam Draft was held a little while back here. There's an exceptional player exemption for one player in particular, and he's going to be a Regina Pat. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then a few local kids that got taken also, and they got some pretty top billing there, and some of the hockey in and around Regina and area, I guess. We'll talk a little bit about that and those kinds of things. So nice. A little bit of dub stuff, and then obviously we'll jump to the CFL draft. There were some happenings there, a deal for number 1 pick. We'll give a few little quick grades on what we think of how the Riders did, maybe a couple picks that we can discuss as to whether or not we thought they were good, bad, or ugly for the Riders or any other team, anything that maybe caught our eye. And then we're going to jump right to probably the bulk of our show, the all-time, all-Canadian CFL rosters that we put together. A little challenge. It'll be a little bit of fun.
A little weekend homework,
yeah.
It was a little more challenging than I thought, and I think Matt feels the same.
Oh, yeah, there's a few positions and a few names where you went, that guy, I really liked him. He wasn't Canadian. Shit. Have to keep thinking about this. Yeah. So not that the Canadians aren't out there. It's just you don't. Sometimes guys play in a certain place and they're fan favorites long enough that you just like inherit them. Like they're Canadian, right?
Exactly.
So
stick
you don't
around,
really
everyone.
think of them as anything other than a Canadian Football League player. So they're Canadian in your mind, but they're not.
So stick around.
Sometimes they're
compare our list to yours. Let us know who your top CFL players were by position, if you want, or just favorite Canadian CFL players. Let us know in the comments, and we'll talk about it later on in the show. But we're going to move right on to the dub draft from a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. There's the very first exceptional player status granted to a young man who's out of West Vancouver Academy, Connor Bedard. He was taken number 1 overall by the Pats, and the Pats are doing their homework on him for, like, I think Paddock said, like 15, 16 months prior to the draft, hoping that if he did end up with exceptional status, that there was a chance he was going to be able to pick him. So he kind of wanted to know what he was getting into and parents and all the other stuff, right? So they really did do their homework on him. So, So, and in saying that, there's only a few exceptional players' statuses ever granted.
First in the dub, right?
Well, that's the first in the dub, but I mean in the CHL in general. There's
5,
not
right?
too many, right?
I think
Johnny
5 others or
Tavares comes to
something.
mind, right? Guys like that. So, I mean, it's pretty rare country, right? So there's a lot on this kid's back already at 14 years of age in terms of, if you're an exceptional player, you're probably going first overall in your draft or first or second in the dub draft or a junior draft. So, you're going to a team that's obviously not that good. I mean, the Pats, since the Memorial Cup when they hosted 2 years ago, were kind of wallowing in mediocrity, but there's always that Memorial Cup hangover
For
because
sure.
they always sell the farm a little bit to, sell the future to acquire what they need to make that Mem Cup run. So, this is going to definitely advance the ticket sales, the jersey sales, and hopefully the win column too, right? I'm pretty sure he'll help in that regard.
And the
But
interest in
I
the
mean,
Pats.
I mean, you see all the kids around town here, and they talk about Jordan Eberle, or if you go back far enough, there'll be guys who grew up, on the Colton Cylinder or on the Mike Cylinders of the world, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you pick the era that you watch the Regina Pats in, and there's some pretty talented guys that you watched, and maybe it's unfair to heap this on a 14-year-old, but none of these guys potentially are going to even remotely compare to this kid.
No.
Like they're talking he's 2023 draft eligible for the NHL, and it might be one of those guys by the time he gets there is a complete no-brainer first overall. The Sidney Crosby type status kind of guys, right? So it'll be pretty special to watch him come up through the ranks here a little bit and right under your nose, and
He's so
very much an
young.
affordable ticket because you want to watch him in the show.
Yeah.
It might be a lot of money, right? So, and who knows where he'll be, but he also, as a note, in terms of getting exceptional player status, I'm not sure if everybody's quite aware as to how that goes. They interview you off ice is a big part of it, if not more of it to some degree than the on ice. I mean, putting the puck in the net is very important in your skills and your size and your strength and all that kind of stuff. But being able to move away from home and handle the off ice stuff and the first overall pick and right. So that maturity and everything needs to be there for him to get that status, that box checked off to get the exceptional status. So, but he led his team in scoring this year. The next closest player on the team was 13 points behind him at a very good program. And the kid that was just behind him and second on the team in scoring was 3 years older than him. He's playing against kids who are 3 and 4 years older than him. So, the fact that he put up 84 points in 36 games playing against guys 3 to 4 years older than him on average is pretty cool. And you have to know he's probably being targeted most games in terms of being shut down. So, he's used to the attention already, I'm sure. So hopefully he'll come in and he'll make an impact. He'll do something. But just to be fair to him, I think people here in Regina need to remember his first year here. If he's a point-a-game player at that age,
that'd be great.
That is amazing. That is amazing, right? To me, I think his range is probably in that 50 to 70-ish points if he plays the full slate of games. And that's pretty good. Like that is damn good. So, and hopefully on a team that's not that great, but not that bad, he gets some penalty kill time, everything else. He develops his total game too, in the middle of it all.
I think the Pats made a trade for a goalie today, didn't they?
I think I heard something about a trade today. I was working too damn hard, I guess, to
I know. I just
really break it down. But
caught a wind of it or something. So
they were
I think
in the market a little bit.
They're going to put the pieces together to.
Yeah, and they had a very good European draft. They picked a very high talent type individual kid in the European draft too. So, or the import draft, what do you want to call it? But something that makes Bedard special, and you watch a little bit of YouTube on him. His puck handling is off the chain. He's got great balance, great agility. Like he changes direction without having those busybody feet that some guys will have, right? Like he just does it very smooth, very, very subtle. Like it's not
like how Bobby Orr used to skate around people.
Yeah, like guys who just Yeah, exactly. Right. So very easy to watch. And he credits the Power Edge Pro system. And I don't know, you guys aren't as big a hockey guys as maybe I am, but the Power Edge system is what Connor McDavid actually used, his training. And I'm going to give some props to a guy in town here that I helped run some of. I was on the ice and helping out with the camps and stuff. He's the Power Edge Pro guy here in town, and that's Darcy Verreau. I mean, if any of you local guys are going to go and watch, and your kids are going to watch Bedard at the rink, and you want to know how he got those skills, they're very and you can see it with McDavid, with Bedard. Like it's a very tough system to do. The kids love it, but it is tough as hell. It puts awkward puck movements, everything, but it's all about edges. It's all about puck control. And yeah, Darcy Verreau, Power Edge Pro. Just look it up. And this kid, with his skating ability too, is pretty exceptional. So if you want a power skating guy in town, my boy is Brett Bobick. The kids love him, and he'll get them better. They'll be sore, but they'll get better. So anyway, when you go watch Bedard, there's guys in town who can teach you this stuff. So before you buy your kid a jersey, maybe get him a little bit of on ice help too. But I'm looking forward to seeing this kid. He'll be something else. Pretty special, and pretty affordable too. I'm going to pay a lot of money to see him in the show.
Yep.
Anyway, but there's a few kids that made some headlines a little bit too, with being picked fairly high. Local kids in the Regina and or area, and like the 7th overall pick was to Seattle with Sam Aremba. He's a centerman here in Regina. 7th overall is pretty high billing. That's pretty good stuff. So Seattle will be expecting him to do something here in a couple of years for them. Another one was 21st overall with Swift Current. So we'll probably see a lot more of him because he's in Swift Current. But that was Brady Burney. Both those young men played on the Regina Monarchs this year in Bantam AA in Regina. So there's good hockey in Regina. I don't care how big we are, but there is good hockey here. So, and I actually like going out and watching the Bantam AA's and the midget AAA guys, because I don't know, something about kids that age, they really love the sport. There's no money in it. They're not making business decisions on the ice. You know what I mean? Like,
What
they
age
go
group
for it.
is that?
They're coming.
What's bantam and midget? I don't know what that is.
Well, that's what I call it. There's no you anything with me.
That's an antiquated term now. It doesn't exist anymore, does it?
No.
Well, you
It's
U17,
U
U19,
exactly.
you fuck right off. That's what
I think Bantam's under 15 and midget's under 17, right?
Yeah, there you are. So, to me, yeah, you can, whatever. The politically correct terms, but we all know there's no such thing as politically correct. Did you guys know that? There's just correct. So they're under 15 years old. We can call it U15, but I'm traditional, so I'll still say Bantam. And then a few other kids, Prairie Storm kid, Ben Richer, he's out of Bethune, but he played in Prairie Storm this year. He went in the 2nd round of Moose Jaw. So a Swift Current, a Moose Jaw pick. So there's kids that are local, they're family, they're friends, people who saw them growing up are still going to be able to watch them fairly regular basis. So that'll be pretty cool, I think. So
the province
and then
did
Moose
well
Jaw,
too.
the province did well too, actually. Yeah.
Couple Saskatoon contacts, I think, went 2 and 3, right?
Yeah, and they were looking for exceptional player status actually last year for some of those guys and didn't get it. So
oh, really?
They already knew these guys were really good players last year. So it was almost, don't screw it up. You're going to be a high pick this year kind of thing. So, yeah, and Moose Jaw getting one of those young men was pretty awesome, because right down the road, nothing beats a good old Warriors Pats play for blood and teeth match, right? Yeah, exactly. So 233 players selected, 13 rounds. Where did I read that? 85 different teams. Oh, there it is. Saskatchewan had 53 players chosen. So second to, I believe,
Ontario?
Alberta.
Ontario. Oh, really?
Alberta. Well, these are Western kids,
Western,
right? So,
okay.
Yeah. Alberta led all provinces with 77 players. Then 53 for us. 7 first-rounders for Saskatchewan. And BC had 49 taken, Manitoba 33. So yeah, pretty cool. Manitoba didn't have any kids picked in the first round. So yeah,
They're Manitoba.
well, the only guy that I really like from Manitoba is like Johnny Taves. Hard to argue Johnny Taves, but yeah, they get one every once in a while, even a Grey Cup, right? Anyway, it was actually the second time. Actually, it was the second time that the Pats in their history, picked first overall in the Bantam draft. The last was in 2005 with Colton Tubert. So, and he turned out to be a pretty decent player. So, played some World Juniors, that kind of stuff. He was a good player. Watched him quite a few times when he was here. So, yeah, pretty cool. But Connor Bedard,
he certainly wasn't a generational player. This is one of those things that's going to be significantly different. From what I understand, anyways, this kid's just head and shoulders above everybody.
Well, and that's sort of the thing. Like, even when you look at like pro sports, it's like, franchise player. They throw that term out like
all the time
now, right? So now the next, like, how do you one up from that? How do you distinguish that guy above those other guys, right? So now it's like, generational player,
Well, I've heard that in hockey, like, it seems like about once every 3 years there's another generational player coming out, and like, how many freaking generations are there?
Right. Well, and a good example even too is like even the Toronto media, which I always have kind of a shot. I always really don't like in a lot of ways, but I mean they have
Austin Matthews, right?
Right. But is Austin Matthews, John Tavares, Willie Nylander, like they have 4 franchise players? No, you don't. You don't. Who's the top dog? There's your franchise player. Well, if you're going to call them all 4 franchise players, what do you call your top dog? He's the generational player. Like they're just calling it something higher. Like, so pretty soon they'll just throw generational player around like fucking confetti. And now what do you got to come up with? Some other term to distinguish
the platinum rewards card.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah,
and you get the double platinum rewards.
What does this get me? Twice the platinum.
Extra
platinum. But yeah,
there's a great Corner Gas episode on that if you ever check it out.
I think I remember that one.
Absolutely made up.
It was pretty cool that we're going to see a kid of that caliber potentially playing right here in town for a few years anyway, and to see a Regina Pat walk to the podium at an NHL entry draft and go first overall would also be pretty cool. Hopefully he can get to that point. So he sounds like a very driven young man. So
I sure hope we're playing hockey by 2023.
Well, they will be. The one thing to watch for, though, too, is this kid's shot. They said he has an NHL caliber shot. So
that's what
at 14.
Yeah, I heard John Paddock talking about his shot.
And, a few of the stories I read about him, he goes out in the driveway and he takes shots. So all you kids out there and your dad says, hey, get out in the garage, take some shots, or fuck off, you're being a pain in my butt. Just go play hockey somewhere. Go take shots. It actually, repetition does somehow get you better.
Practice?
Yeah. Franchise player.
I think the way John Paddock put it was he said that he's like his shot is as I can't remember if he said it was as good as anybody else in the world or better than anybody else in the world.
The thing with John Paddock saying that the guy has an exceptional shot,
John Paddock doesn't throw around random compliments.
Right. And for John Paddock, though, too, you have to also consider, like, he's seen NHL shots, right?
Absolutely.
This kid's he's 14 years old, and they're saying he has an NHL caliber shot. And John Paddock was there when Teemu Solani put 76 by in his rookie season in Winnipeg. Like, he knows what an elite shooter looks like. So if he gives his kid that kind of praise, and like you said, he doesn't throw it around lightly, there's something up. Let's go to the rink and pay attention, right? So anyway, moving on. Let's talk some CFL.
It's pretty exciting.
It will be
Everybody
exciting.
get excited.
Get your popcorn ready.
Get your popcorn ready.
So
CFL.
And they've got just before we move to the CFL, you can get your 98 for 98 apparently at
they're already selling the jerseys
at the Pats box office. You can put down $98 and get yourself on the list for season tickets when and if they figure out what the hell they're doing for a season coming up.
Yeah. Well, they've got a little time, hopefully by the fall, to have that actually figured out. So that's good. It's good. Take
Yeah,
their
that
money.
is
Take
that
the
deal is
deposit.
out there now. Yeah, 98 for 98.
There you go, Pats fans. Even Moose Jaw fans, because we know deep down you really like us more. You're just jealous. Shout
Right
it from
on.
the rooftops, right? 98 for 98. I like that. Hopefully his number and his name get synonymous with each other. Like when you say 87 or 99 or 66, someone says 98, you know who we're talking about.
Yep.
Anyway, CFL
Draft.
Yeah, it was pretty
So,
cool. I mean,
I actually
considering.
I forgot it was on until you texted me and said who we took at our pick, and I'm like, oh shit. So then I actually started watching it. They did a really good job for under the circumstances.
Yeah. And having those four guys on there, like Ford and Sanchez and everything, like they're all very well versed. Like Ford takes great pride in knowing the prospects and knowing the needs and, knowing the kids like he really does. So having their little bit of commentary on it was pretty cool too. They did some pretty good, video clips of different kids and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was a pretty decent little job they did there. Not quite sure why I never did read up as to why the commissioner wasn't doing it. Did he not have a suite of a leather chair to go skulking down into, or?
I think he's worried about not answering phone calls from the PA.
Oh, you know what? Actually, I get why the commissioner does it, but at the same time, does the commissioner have to do it? Like in that format, what was our biggest beef with Goodell? He's not really.
No, he's not an entertainer.
Yeah,
right.
That's
so
what
having
I thought.
Yeah, no, you know what? Until you just mentioned that, I didn't even realize that he wasn't calling out the picks. I was just paying attention to who was picked and what they were going to talk about him.
Right. And having a TV personality in there doing all that, calling the picks out, everything else makes total sense in that format because they can go transition in and out of video clips and picks and away they go, right? So I thought it was pretty good. It was pretty smooth and considering the circumstance, it was really well done. So, but TSN does a pretty good job of their CFL stuff for the most part.
And it was a rash, right?
Yeah.
I was watching the Rod Peterson show, another great sports podcast. And he was talking to Dave Naylor. He said that was the first live thing they've done since this whole thing, like Sports Center and all that. It's patched together. Everybody's filming their parts and then they're piecing it together. But that was the first actual live thing. And up until 10 days before, they weren't sure they were going to broadcast it. So that was really cool to hear that.
You mean like as the Sports Center people?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like they're not taping like a live show like they would normally do, right?
Right. But it's still got to be exciting for them to actually get into something live, something current, something that's actually going on, right?
True, but I also found it quite funny that what they needed to do was basically what we're doing right here, and we're three just slightly above average Joes in their professional sports broadcast network. I've kind of found it funny, the progress and the speed to which some of these networks have taken to get good video and audio like from their homes. I'm shooting this like on an iPhone. Like it.
Yeah.
The
technology
with
in
a
your
free
pocket's
piece of
pretty
software
amazing.
that anybody can get online for free. So it's kind of funny. But they did it. But they did a good job. For doing a live broadcast that way, they did a good job.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So, do you think any of these teams did a good job though? So Ed Hervey traded up to number 1 overall.
I think
they were shopping number 1 overall. Huffer was out there publicly saying, "I want to make a deal. If somebody will come make a deal, we're open for business." So Huffnagel swapped with Eddie Hervey. And he got the 3rd and 12th overall pick, and BC got 1st and 15th overall pick. So not too bad. Couple of spots at each pick difference, right? So not too bad. But I don't know what the implications are in terms of signing the guy or anything like that in terms of dollars. as to why first or third, but BC must really, 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 really want him at linebacker. And I think he's in that Cam Judge type ilk, speed. He's got it all, right?
Yeah, and
he's got the passport.
So they say. He hasn't actually played in 2 years, right?
Ish, yeah. So, there is that, but at the same time, the measurables are there. He's the right size. He's, and
Why hasn't he played for 2 years?
He's a good football player. So, various circumstances, I guess.
I think he basically, from what I understood, he didn't really stick in the NFL. And so he was kind of resigned to the fact that basically his football career was essentially over. And then somehow in a conversation with somebody, it came up that his mom was Canadian. And they suggested, hey, you could be really valuable in the CFL.
And there's a lot of conversations that are, or situations where guys aren't really aware that they would actually become, get Canadian status, right? So,
right. And he's just like, hey,
so this is a last resort for him then.
Yeah. And I've even seen it in past drafts where certain teams know that there's guys that can get the Canadian passport and other teams don't. So they pick them.
Really?
Yeah, they've picked, not first overall, obviously, but they've picked guys where it's like, he's Canadian? Like, what? And then the guy gets the passport and away you go, right? So
there should be a guide published by the league or something.
Well,
right? Like,
there is more so now, but years and years ago, like it was pretty Wild West. You freewheeled her, right? So if you did your homework, you could maybe sneak that kind of a thing in there, right? So I thought it wasn't a bad deal for BC to go up and get a kid who's a ratio changer, a game changer. They need those there, especially defensively. They were kind of a hot mess last year on both sides of the ball. Not a bad deal for them, right? And if Huffer still got the guy he wants at third, then away you go, right?
BC needed to make a splash after getting Riley last year and then shitting the bed as badly as they did. They really need to make another splash this year and make a success of it.
Yeah, that's the key right there, though. You said it. If they make a success of it, because if they don't make a success of it and they're just doing consecutive, if they keep doing the splash, they kind of start to resemble the old Washington Redskins. Just spend money, make the splash signing, but don't get results, right?
Or the Saskatchewan Roughriders under Chris Jones, it seemed like for a while. We get the Derek Dennis and whoever
we'd make
else
a splash,
make the big splash, and they never seem to pan out.
The guy himself maybe doesn't pan out, right?
Right. I don't know if it like these. That's the thing about the drafts, man. You just never know. Like, if this kid hasn't been playing for 2 years, and he's only playing now because he thinks he's now found out he could possibly be valuable as a Canadian. I don't know. Those aren't the kind of football players I want. Doesn't seem like he's wholehearted into being a professional football player.
Yeah, but he didn't know that professional option was open to him. So still. I can cut him a little slack there. But at the same time, even if he was American with those measurables,
he could still play in the CFL as an American.
Why wouldn't he have been invited?
Exactly.
So I don't.
I don't
totally disagree with your thought process there at all. So.
I want kids who want it. That's who I'd be drafting. Kids who want it.
I'm always concerned as if I'm the GM, I'm always concerned about somebody who's taken time to sit out for any reason, really.
Yeah.
Whether it be a rehab from an injury or an academic injury or a suspension or you name the reason.
Well, injuries
generally it's not really going to help you out, right? As far as whether or not I'm interested in you.
Injuries are always my concern when these guys have taken time off, right? And then they come into camp, and more often than not, they get injured coming out of camp because they're not in that kind of shape anymore, and you just can't get it back overnight.
Or something.
I don't know. It's like Cam Judge's brother coming in last year, right? You know, hadn't played football in a few years. What did he make? The 3 days before he was injured?
Brief, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Fair enough.
I just think it's hard when, like Matt said, once you've taken time off for whatever reasons. I think it as a professional athlete, I think it's really hard to turn it back on.
Yeah. Well, and it depends. Yeah. It's hard to get right back in the groove, right? Injuries, in my opinion, are the hardest to come back from and get back in the groove. Some injuries get in your head, and that ball, and it keeps you from doing what you used to do. You're playing a little bit fearful or cautious. The other one too is you're not as capable anymore because the injuries slowed you down in some ways, right? So it inhibits your ability to do what you were doing before. So, I don't know. Have you guys been watching the Last Dance on Netflix?
Not yet. I've been seeing bits and pieces of it, but I'm gonna
Okay,
sit
well,
and watch it.
when you
at
do
some
watch
point.
it, okay, just remember what this conversation about the time off, and wait till the Rodman and even Jordan both have these little "I gotta leave town, blow off steam, come back" moments. But it's not the same. It's it's a day or two, or in Rodman's case, like almost a week. It's not like they were away for
Yeah, that's different
crazy
than a
amounts of
couple years
time,
off,
right?
right?
But I mean, but like to Maddie's point, why was he not playing? Like Rodman's in Vegas doing what?
Well, hey, speaking of Jordan, was Jordan the same basketball player when he came back after his break from going to play baseball?
Yeah, yeah. And I think
And
part of
that's somebody
take,
with a ridiculous amount of drive and competitiveness.
yeah. Well, and you know what? And I think part of it is though too with some of these guys, the drive is still to some degree there, but for like a guy like Jordan, we're a little off topic with CFL, but for a guy like Jordan, it was really more in my mind. It was just the immense amount of media and pressure and the image upkeep that broke him down. He just needed a break from his life. Like, I just need to breathe as a little more regular human being and then come back. Basketball was never really the issue to me. Like,
Wow. So the
he,
social media age would have absolutely crushed him then.
oh, for sure.
Oh
For sure.
God.
For sure. It's a whole other ball game now, like with social media. So, but yeah, I mean, try to be Michael Jordan for a day. You couldn't do it. You couldn't do it.
So the Riders' first pick.
Riders' first pick.
U of S kid.
Mattland Riley from U of S. First round, 7th overall.
Anytime we take a Sasky boy for the line, man, it's a happy day for me.
Well, and there's some talk too that he could potentially project to center in a year or two. Dan Clark signed a couple years.
Yeah.
There may be a progression there to the whole thing. Sounds like he's a pretty nasty little piece of work. So, I mean,
what you want in a lineman?
Yep.
Exactly. If he can wrestle calves, he can wrestle D tackles. Sort of idea. The U of S, good program there too. They got a Hall of Famer running. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, he's probably well versed in how to be a pro O lineman in a lot of ways. So good program to come out of as an O lineman with that coach in your back pocket helping you. So
and
I thought it was a good pick.
I've heard Flory talking about all of his guys that got drafted, and had extremely high praise for them, and Mattland was of course certainly right at the top. Right. He was quite impressed. He said eventually, though, he expects all of his guys who got drafted to play meaningful snaps in the CFL at some point.
That's good.
Some sooner than later.
Right, exactly, right? Some guys are going to take a little longer to make that adjustment and get up to speed, or
that's what you want.
Polish the game.
That's what you want for your program to be doing, and then you're going to get even better O-linemen.
Exactly. So, having said that, I thought, for the Riders, they needed an O-line, young O-lineman. Mm-hmm. That was a good one. And the thing that I liked about Riley, though, too, was it's not that he's, NFL camp or anything. Like, he's going to be able to come here. He's going to be able to get on the roster. He's going to get the training camp. He's going to get everything he needs right from day one to get up to speed to play the CFL game for a CFL team. there's no, geez, is he going to show up from this NFL camp as an undrafted or
or
any of that?
hold out for a
And
contract or
right. And those guys, nothing against them. They're very talented. That's why they get those invites. But sometimes you just kind of want to have it a little more cut and dry and settled and have them in your building and in your program and in your playbook sooner. Right. We saw what happened with Josiah St. John and that holdout. I think it was a speed bump his career never really could take. After, like, he never really got, like, he's super talented, but that first round billing, first overall in that case, was a lot of pressure to begin with, and then missing camp
really got
and
into his head, it seemed. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you miss camp, you're behind in the playbook, and then you're not playing as well as you probably want to or they expect you to. Like, it becomes a snowball effect to some degree.
Somebody else is taking your reps, and that means they're taking your job.
Right. Can't make the club in the tub, right? Like, same sort of idea. If you're not on the field, you're not
making the team.
Yeah. You're either getting better or they're getting another guy. That's kind of how it works. So, I hope for Riley's sake he can get here and get in the playbook, get everything started. Good young lineman. We've got St. John, who isn't too old, but also has some warts to his game that maybe he can smooth out. And we need to look at the O-line getting rebuilt slowly in the background. This is a good first step to making sure that happens. So,
guys, where do you see a guy like Riley as far as like where he's at this point coming in? Pretend we're going to have a season this fall. Coming into camp, is he going to compete for like that number 6 spot? Be the backup O-lineman, perhaps?
6'7". I don't think he can play tackle at the CFL level, especially right out of the box. He's an interior guy. So if he can play some, interior snaps or back up the interior to some degree, that would be fantastic. Depending who else is at camp. I mean, we have Schramm, St. John, a couple other guys. St. John is a little bit longer in the tooth, a little more proven CFL guy. So, and he's probably more likely he could back up a tackle position if we have a Canadian tackle, if Shapley actually goes out there. But I mean, there's options. There's definitely options, but we need to rebuild the interior as much as anything, because that's where our Canadians are presently starting. Labatt being older and Clarkey being older, there's definitive need to get some youth at the backup position. So this kid playing any one of those inside 3 positions is a good pick as far as I'm concerned. So hopefully it works out. So, but then it kind of gets a little crazy. We had no 2nd or 3rd round pick.
I think we had a great draft
due to trades. But I mean, it's what you make of the picks you do have, right?
Exactly.
So Kian Schaefer-Baker, and I had mentioned it last week that I thought maybe they'd go receiver at some point, maybe even 1st round if the right guy was there, but nobody was worth taking at number 7 when they did pick for receivers too. But they had a greater need at O-line, obviously, so still, great pick. But my thoughts were that they want to start 1 Canadian receiver for sure. I think they're on the cusp of maybe 2. If they go get another guy who kind of fits the profile of some of the other guys, right? McInnes is a big, tall, lanky, speedy kid. Linus was the same. He's a big, tall kid, good frame, good, they went out and got another 6'4" receiver who's got some pretty good measurables. He can run like the Dickens as far as I heard. So, to get a guy like that in the 4th round who's got some good measurables, yeah, he might take a little time. But if you're used to playing a big receiver at that spot, and say McInnes was that guy and he went down, you have a guy who maybe can go fill that spot who's somewhat the same type of athlete and build, right? So, to me, it was a really good pick. It was a really good pick. And they've got some good receivers too. But I mean, if you want to start 1, maybe you need 2 backing up even, like competition matters, right? So
absolutely.
And I personally think that the 2 receivers we picked last year are both going to be on the game day roster from day one all throughout the season. They're going to get every opportunity to play. and prove themselves.
Yeah, it's whether they take that opportunity or not.
Right. And there's some other good Canadian receivers on the roster too that they're going to be competing with. So even if they're not starting, they could be backing up a little, but they're going to get some meaningful snaps and they're going to get a chance to prove themselves. So someone like this Schaefer Baker, just being on the practice roster, kind of keeps somebody nipping at your heels to say, hey, you got to keep moving forward. And we've got guys who can be big receivers like this right in behind you. Competition's a wonderful thing. So, I don't know that it's going to maybe change some of those guys' approaches, but a little pressure makes diamonds. So I think we'll maybe have 2 receivers potentially on the field that are Canadian this year, but we're pretty loaded up at receiver. But hey,
always good for the ratio.
Double down.
Bring back the Canadian Air Force.
Exactly.
Yeah, amen to that. So how tall was Andy Fantuz, by the way?
6'3".
Andy Fantuz would be the 4th tallest receiver on the Riders roster right now. And he was a big son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Like, you watch him run, he was a big boy. Yeah, you start rolling out McKinnis.
Rob Begg and Dressler were his other 2 receivers, so everybody looks giant compared to...
I think sometimes...
It's like me standing beside you, dude.
You watch Fantuz catch the ball, and then there's Dressler trying to throw a block beside him, to spring him to get more yards, and I'm like, he could just pick him up and put him under the other arm. But yeah, having these 6'4", 6'5" guys getting in and out of the cuts can be a little bit difficult for those big boys, but there's no doubt that the red zone shouldn't be a problem either with that many mismatches potentially, right? So I love that pick. I really did. So
yeah, I did too.
The other guy that they picked was out of the same school. They picked Baker out of Guelph. Shaker Baker. There's his name. Let's go with that. Shaker Baker.
It's already been named.
Right.
AJ Allen as a linebacker. I think he's going to have a very good shot to maybe make the practice roster at the very least. But
great name.
Super athletic linebacker. Sounds like he can play some specials, but he's also a guy who's got some sacks and tackles for loss. He played some D-end even at Guelph. So that versatility, right? So coming off the edge or even putting him in on some blitz packages as a Canadian, like having a wild card guy like that is pretty cool, right? So, and you kind of saw not that the defense is completely the same, but it's somewhat similar, is having that wild card sort of player on the field, right? Like, we got the AC Leonards and guys like that, those tall, lanky dudes playing D-end, that can go all over. They can play up in multiple spots. Maybe not so much Leonard, but still having that wild card guy. So that versatility is a big deal in the CFL. So it should hopefully get him on the roster to some degree, or specials at the very least, because it matters. It really does. That versatility is a big thing. So
especially in the CFL.
Versatility is constantly a thing in the CFL because we have such compressed rosters.
Exactly, right? So just hearing that he's athletic, he can play some end, he can rush the passer a little bit, and he's athletic enough that he's not a liability at coverage. That's all good stuff, right? So not saying, and the CFL draft and was on TSN, and those guys are all kind of saying too, they need somebody after Cam Judge. They lost Sam Hurl. He's not the only Canadian linebacker we have either. Allen's not going to have to be the backup to Judge. So the opportunity's there, but he doesn't have to be that guy. So they'll still have to scrap for it. But in terms of the rest of the Riders draft, I don't know about you guys, but it was all sort of dart throws after that a little bit. Good players, but potential's there.
Yes, I think they went with potential players in places that if they pan out, it would be good for how they're building their roster. But yeah, I certainly agree with you. But isn't that kind of the second half of the CFL draft is pretty much dart throws anyways?
Second half of most drafts is somewhat just dart throws, right? Like banking on potential more than what they're,
for sure.
They'll grow into a better player. They're not peaking as athletes quite yet, right? So some guys are going to take a little longer to bloom. So I don't know. I was a little bit curious with the DB out of McGill, that Vincent Dethier, however you say it. We don't start a Canadian DB other than safety. So is he going to be a safety? I don't know.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Maybe safety, but probably special
maybe
teamer.
Safety. But the other one too was the Jonathan Femi Cole out of Western as a running back. You're kind of like, I don't know. He didn't really carry the ball much there even. Like, he seems to be a good pass catcher from what I could tell. But
do we still have
he block?
LaFrance?
What's that?
Do we still have LaFrance? Is he still on the roster?
LaFrance? I think he left us. Double check this here quick. But still, it's sort of one of those, is he a kick returner? He really wasn't the starter per se. Like, he wasn't a complete stud in university, in the CIS. So I don't know. I mean, good athlete, has some potential to maybe do something, play some specials, whatever.
They must have saw something in him.
Yeah, so I'm not sure where he fits in, but maybe he was just the best player on their board and they liked him, so they took him. So sounds like he's, got potential. But the one that the last two picks actually intrigued me more than the two we just mentioned, right? Jesse Lawson out of Carleton, which is a very good program as an old lineman. Mm-hmm. He's not a right now guy.
No, he's a project.
He's a project, but at the same time, we've seen guys who come in and they're not immediate guys. They take a year or two and then they become something. So that being said, O-line, we just talked about how valuable those O-linemen are going to be, those young O-linemen. In a year or two, if he is good enough to play or start or even just be on the game day roster, that'll be a big help for us, because in 2 years, Labatt, Clark, who knows, right? So I thought that was potentially a pretty sneaky good pick. And then Gallimore, I don't know. You guys want to maybe talk?
I love it. That one? I love it. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? You never know. You never know.
And you do exactly right. You never know. The other part
I've seen first round busts in the NFL, so why wouldn't there be a third round bust in the NFL?
Keenan LaFrance is still a rider, just for an FYI. So, I kind of figured he was. I couldn't remember if he re-signed or not, but
maybe they've got plans for something.
Well, he's a good specials guy, LaFrance, right? Canadian, everything else. So maybe this kid takes a little time and does become sort of that kind of player. But the Gallimore pick, I said last week that him and Claypool being drafted so high makes them almost undraftable in the CFL draft, because it's a long ways, almost undraftable.
Yeah.
So if you're going to take them, you take them this late. And the potential upside of Gallimore in 3 or 4 years, if he does show up here, would be huge. That would be huge. And 3-4 years, I don't know, Zach Evans, if he's here or not, I don't know, but he'll be at the tail end of his career. It's just another Canadian in a Canadian spot where we play a Canadian. Like, it could be seamless potentially too, right? So, but he's got some pretty good pedigree, and for your 8th round pick.
Yeah, it's highly unlikely, but it would be really
throw
genius if it happened, right? Yeah, and it's 8th round.
And it's 8th round. Worth taking a shot at.
But if you pick a guy, say in 10 drafts, O'Day does the next 10 drafts, and he gets one 8th rounder here who gets on his game day roster, is a regular starter and contributor, that's probably a pretty good pick.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably the percentages of an 8th round pick actually getting here. So you may as well take the guy who obviously is a good football player, just might have to wait.
Yep.
That's okay. No, I really like that. If you're going to throw darts, throw for the bullseye, right?
Might as well, right?
Exactly. In terms of a few other picks, though, too, like, to me, was there any pick where you looked through and you went, "Ooh, that was a really good pick"? I really like that pick for that team.
For us?
Well, for any team. I mean, for us, for any team, really.
That receiver that Calgary snagged, the guy who got the positive drug test, I thought that was a sneaky good pick.
Yes, I heard.
I can't remember his name off the top of my head for some reason.
That was a great pick, yeah.
Because it was I think it was kind of a minor incident that I don't think really points to what type of player he's going to be, and he's like a stud.
Oh, kind of like Andrew Harris.
No, Andrew Harris is a cheater. Still a damn good running back, though.
Yeah, he is.
Still a cheater. If he's in green and white, I'd say he's not a cheater. It's completely legal.
It's all above board, right? All above board as long as he's a rider. And in sort of that same idea though too, like some of these guys fall not because of talent. They'll fall a little bit because of some side story, some other issue, right? So Huffnagel, I think, has a pretty veteran locker room or good coaching staff, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think those things don't
if it was a
bother him
big
as
enough
much.
problem, maybe they can help the kid out, so if he has a legitimate problem. If it was just a one-time fuck up, then,
Right.
Whatever. So not for us to really know. Travell Pinto from UBC, was that who you're thinking? Their second rounder?
That's it.
Yeah. And that was the guy. They picked him in the spot that they got swapped with BC on. So maybe he was targeting him the whole time. So who knows? But yeah, no, I don't disagree.
I like that pick.
Don't disagree. UBC has a good program, so potentially he could be very good for them. The one pick that I really kind of stood out, and I mean, there's a lot of good players and stuff, but one was Carter O'Donnell in my mind, who went to the Als in the third round as an O-lineman. He's in Indianapolis right now, working out there, trying to get into their camp, everything else, but he's a 290-pound O-lineman, which in the NFL doesn't cut it.
Yeah.
He's a little, and he needs a few more cheeseburgers, maybe to, not be so light in the pants. But I mean, I don't think he's going to be down there very long. Montreal's going to get him sometime in the middle of the season or, later in the year. And I think he's a very good player. If he wasn't maybe signed up in Indianapolis, he would have moved up from the third round into the second, maybe first. Like, he's that good of a player. So to get a guy of that value that you maybe just wait a little bit to get,
a little bit longer,
could pay off really big for Montreal. So I thought it was a really good move for them. And I think in terms of them rebounding and them getting going again, they need Canadian talent that can play, right? So if he's getting invited to Indy, he may not be that long before he's on the field and playing. So, I thought it was a really good pick for them. So, especially as a third. You look through the list of third round picks, there's a lot of guys who just never even show up, right? So in terms of a worst pick, was there anyone you went, holy shit, what were they doing?
That's kind of hard in this. I don't watch
you kind of have to let it play out a little bit.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah. Well, the one, and nothing against the kid, the one that stuck out for me, and I said it last week, that Nathan Rourke at quarterback, they're talking about how he might go 1 overall. Jordan Williams and him were the potential number. There's no incentive to take a quarterback. None. They've de-incentivized taking a quarterback in the CFL draft by not counting that Canadian as a Canadian on the roster on game day, right? So
right now,
if it's right now, right? So if it's a de-incentivized sort of situation, like he fell into the second round, he went 15th overall, but as a second rounder, and there's no real, it's a Canadian football draft, right? So you're looking for Canadians because you got to fill that quota of passports that you need that read the right way.
Maybe they think the rule's going to change by the time that guy's ready to play.
But he's probably 2 years before I would say he's ready to play.
Right? Isn't that when Riley's contract's done?
But you take a guy who is going to take 2 years in the second round, I'd be looking maybe a little more like a guy who could maybe contribute a little bit earlier or in a place that it actually matters that he's Canadian. So nothing against the kid. I really want to see him succeed. I really want to see a Canadian quarterback, but that high with no real incentive on
he's
the
good
roster
enough
side.
Then. Maybe he's good enough.
I think he's going to be potentially good enough to stick around for a few years at the very least, and someone's going to give him a shot to play a little bit maybe, but the Canadian passport means nothing, and it's a Canadian draft. So you kind of have to go for guys who actually are going to get you that
guarantees the rights, right?
Right. So to me, it's a bit of a little bit too high of a spot for him until there's incentive for them to pick him because he's Canadian also. He got picked that high because he's that talented.
Well, that's what I was going to say. What if they think he's that good?
But
isn't it worth picking him no matter what? Because somebody else will pick him if you don't, right?
Right. So they picked him so they could have his rights.
But you can't run short on Canadians though either, because you're only as good as your Canadians. And when you're a team like BC that's pretty shitty, especially Canadians, I would think I'd want guys that count in that way as much as the talent. So,
yeah.
To me, I think that's one of the most.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the most intriguing things about the CFL game is the ratio and all the gymnastics sometimes that it entails with your rosters. But
hopefully they do change it like Kyle said, and then there is a very definitive advantage and reason why you have him on the field. He counts as a Canadian. It helps you in the ways it's supposed to help you, picking a Canadian player in the Canadian draft, right? They get all the perks of it, not just, hey, he's a pretty good player. So, to me, he's got to be good to be drafted that high without the incentive, but it could potentially backfire pretty badly if they don't actually get an incentive to play him as a Canadian, right? Like, they kind of need the results now, like Maddie said earlier about BC. They kind of need the results now. It's going to start costing Hervey a job. It'll probably end up costing a head coach a job again, right? Like,
again,
So, Rourke potentially could play, but if they don't actually change the rules to really make it beneficial to play him for the BC Lions as a Canadian, it could be a little high. That's all. That is a very intriguing one to see play out over the next couple of years on the league level, the team level, the player level, all three levels, as far as I'm concerned. But there's a little potential to backfire there, maybe. That being said, CFL, we're rolling CFL, right?
We're rolling.
So let's talk about our all-time all-Canadian CFL teams.
Well, this should be fun.
Exactly.
My team's meaner than your team. My dad can beat up your dad.
I didn't put your holder or long snapper picks.
Those are like surefire Hall of Famers.
They would be.
I never thought of that. Well, my long snapper would be Polecat.
Yeah.
Heath was your mom.
So perfect. He could put the laces where you wanted them.
I said that the all-time all-Canadian best ball holder was your mom's, and the best all-time all-Canadian long snapper was your sister's. No? Okay, fair enough. Bad joke.
I don't have
Dad
any
jokes. Anyway, I can't quite see the list there.
That's okay. Well, we'll start at quarterback, and it was a clean sweep. That one was pretty easy. That's kind of like the first overall pick in the NFL draft this year.
Consensus, eh?
I think that's what we call a tautology. It's not even up for it's just a plain fact, right?
Yep, that's just a fact. It's just a fact. But then moving on to running back, this is where we've got a little bit of difference. I went with Andrew Steroids Harris, and Heath went with Normie Kwong, and Matt went with John Cornish. Now there could be debate on whether Norm was a running back or a fullback.
Right.
Well, and that we're talking just as the show is getting going, the evolution of the game. Some of these guys, like, George Reed being an all-timer, not so much Canadian, but all-time player in the league, he was a fullback. In today's day and age, he'd be a tailback or running back, right? So the evolution of the game.
Normie Kwong was tiny though too, right?
Normie Kwong felt really dumb.
You're right. He'd never survived. But I felt really dumb putting him down as a fullback. But at the same time, that's what I found him listed as. So I went, well,
that's what he was.
I'll put him there, right?
Yeah,
I needed a fullback. He's just little, right?
Right. So the evolution of the game has to to kind of be taken into account a little bit though too, right? Because it's the game has changed, right? So now like the fullbacks are big boys who lead block primarily and go in and out of the game and don't maybe catch the ball even as much. And back then the fullback was the dude, right? Like that was
they
just the
carried
way the game
ball
was
every
played.
other down.
Yeah, right. So, but I mean, Normie Kwong at 5'7" and $170. I don't care how you line up or what era you're in. You got to be a tough little SOB to handle the pounding. And back then, the men were men. Like, let's not, I'm not taking anything away from today's guys, but some of those dudes were tough. And he played a long time at a high level. So Normie Kwong at that size, in that day and age, for that long a career, pretty damn good ball player. Got to give him kudos. And he was the lieutenant governor of Alberta, for Christ's sake. So
yeah,
he was no dummy. He was pretty accomplished in a lot of things.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
under old Ralphie Klein.
Well,
so
when it comes down to Andrew Harris or John Cornish, I really don't like either of them. But
nor do I. But I just put in the Moon Man because steroid guy just makes me Ralph a little bit.
yeah, they both kind of make me Ralph, and they're.
But hey, Moon Man was okay.
Moon Man, he's a good running back. He's a good running back. So,
yeah, he definitely had talent. He had a pretty good line and a pretty good coach too that made sure they got the most out of that entire offense. Not to say, he didn't have talent or whatever, but it takes a pretty good team around you dedicated to running the ball in the CFL for you to get those numbers too, right? Andrew Harris's team is, used him quite a bit, and he left BC to go to Winnipeg, a little bit of the going home thing. But at the same time, they weren't using him. They thought he was done,
right?
Yeah, exactly. So they stopped giving him the ball like they were. Well, that'd be like 3-ish at least, right?
Yeah.
But
at least.
I mean, you want your touches. That's just how it is. I don't care. I mean, you're a competitive guy. You want your touches. They weren't giving you touches. You go somewhere else, they'll get you touches. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And he's done well, kind of resurrected his career, got a second win to it. So, Harris being 33, going on 34 right now, I believe. I mean, that's pretty spectacular that you're one of the top couple of backs in the league, or if not the top back in the league, especially longer in his career like that. So, both those guys are pretty good for a long time. Cornish the same, as much as I hated the guy. Well, I shouldn't say hate. I really didn't like him, but you got to respect what he did on the field. He did play at a high level for a pretty long time.
Yeah.
So,
moving on to fullback. Or you still got something to say about running backs?
I did a little something different, I guess, with the fullback position. I went with a traditional modern day game, I guess, fullback, if you will.
That's a pretty good modern day fullback.
I liked Millington.
Yeah, Millington.
Me too. And
who was his buddy? They had the Thunder and Lightning.
What was his name?
BC. I'm trying to think who the hell it was.
Corey Philpott was there for a while, but it was Sean Millington. It'll come to me, but I mean
Robert Drummond.
Drummond, yeah. The thing with Millington that I liked is he ran for yardage. Like, he wasn't just your old school blocking fullback or a short yardage guy, which he did become to some degree a little later on. I really wanted to pick Chris Zarka, who I think has got to get at least an honorable mention here on a Regina, Saskatchewan, based podcast. Sure. The Canuck truck he lived up to the name big time, right? So the thing I liked with Millington is he ran for more yards. He played a long time, same with Zark. He ran for more yards, and I thought he had a little softer hands. He was a little more of a pass catcher too. So more just the all-around weapon was why I liked Millington. Like, he could do a multitude of things, right? And well. So that was the reason I put him on there. So you guys want to move into O-line or receivers? What do we got here?
Let's move
receivers?
To wide receivers. So we picked 2 wide receivers and 2 slot backs. So the wide receivers on my team, my 2 wideouts were Terry Evanshawn and Tony Gabriel. Heath's were Terry Evanshawn and Brad Sinopoli. And Maddie picked Ben Cahoon and Tony Gabriel.
So Tony Gabriel, we all know years gone by, we're not young pups, any of us.
There's a lot of guys I hate on my team.
Yeah, we've forgiven him though, right?
He's a really nice
True.
guy. I met him at the '09 Grey Cup.
What I hear is he's a super guy, and it makes it that much harder that you just hate him right to the core, eh?
Yeah.
But
At
at the
least I
same
didn't
time,
watch
you
it
know,
live.
he was a good player. Like you can
Oh,
hate what happened, but you
outstanding.
can
Yeah.
you
Nope,
also have to give
absolutely.
props to how good they are, right? So Tony Gabriel being on a couple of lists here, I think,
Mhm.
yeah, is very deserved. Like he
For
was
sure.
a pretty special impact guy. So, you know, Evan Shawn is not maybe a name a lot of people know, but he was an
Old-time
impact
football.
player and he could ball. So in that regard, I think he's very deserving. Ben Cahoon, no doubt Ben Cahoon's is an absolute stud.
Yep.
He did play some wideout earlier in his career. They
But
moved him
mostly
to the slot later in his career. He was an impact player at both positions.
Absolutely.
So, I
We'll
mean,
give
putting
you
him
that
at
one.
slot or wideout is really irrelevant. He was an accomplished game-breaking receiver as far as I'm concerned, right?
Yeah.
You're not wrong to put him at either spot as far as I'm concerned because
Gord says he
did
hates
get it
Tony
done.
Gabriel.
What's that?
Gord says he hates Tony Gabriel.
Hate's a strong word, Gord.
He's mentioned that over the years, how much he dislikes him.
Is Gord just that angry? Like maybe he needs more hugs from his kids or something.
No, he can't. It's COVID time.
Oh, it's COVID time. That's right.
You got to stay away from the elderly.
Fucking elbow bumps now. We can't even high five. Jesus. Yeah, I guess, you know, he's
So Sinopoli, hey? Sinopoli.
Yeah, Sinopoli. I was looking through guys who won outstanding Canadian awards and that kind of stuff. Sinopoli's name is on there twice. And for a converted quarterback like he is, you know, and to have won it twice is an accomplishment. There's other guys like Cahoon or whatever that have won it a couple of times. He's won it a couple of times. And I don't think he's done either. Like, I think he's still got some really good years left. So maybe a third time. But I just like Brad Sinopoli. I like how he plays.
Yeah.
I think as a Canadian receiver, he lines up pretty much anywhere and he makes an impact. You got to cover that guy. So to me, you know, maybe a little more of a modern guy, but definitely I think, you know, you don't win
He's probably
those
the only
awards
current player
because
on
you're a
this
fluke.
list, right?
Yeah, I guess that too, right? Get a current guy, but to me, he's won a couple of awards, and those aren't flukes. You've got to be a pretty good damn, you know, football player to do that. So, you know, that's why I put him on there.
You'd take him over Tony Gabriel or Ben Cahoon? Well, I guess obviously you did.
Well, I didn't. I took Ben Cahoon, but I put him as a
slot back, right?
Right. So, the thing I like with Sinopoli, I guess, though, too, if my team actually rolled out and played, I think Cahoon could go outside inside. I think Sinopoli could go outside inside. You can waggle, you can do some stuff, and that's the CFL game, right? So
I think Tony Gabriel would grab Ben Cahoon and just say, "Sit down, little boy. I'll show you."
Yeah, lots of DBs said that too, but he still has 13,000 yards. So I played against guys like that where I'm like the bigger guy and I'm like, I'm gonna fucking smash this guy. There's no way. And then zoom, he's gone by, and you're like, shit, it happened again. Yeah. That's Ben Cahoon. But yeah, Tony Gabriel, a little different style maybe to some degree, but impact guys, right? Got to cover them.
Sure.
So,
well, then that's a good segue onto our slot backs, which we picked today.
Yeah.
I picked good old Ray Algard and Rocky DiPietro. Heath picked Ben Cahoon, the slot/wide receiver, and Ray Algard. And Maddie picked to give the Ray Algard completion. And then, hi, I'm Brian Kelly.
American.
I'm Brian Kelly. And I think he's
an
not
American.
Canadian. Yeah, he's not Canadian.
That was totally wrong. So I was looking back, I was reading ahead and I went, wait a minute. Oh shit, I fell prey to that.
Well, shit happens.
That's okay. I mean, we'll call an audible. Who would you throw in there?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna pick from you guys' list, and I'm gonna pick obviously Rocky DiPietro then, because I already picked Cahoon in another position.
You just want to chant his name, Rocky.
That guy was awesome.
Who doesn't? Well, those Ticats teams were so good, eh?
Like,
Yeah.
Back when
that's
Grover Covington was making quarterbacks fearful, and
that's the
the good
childhood
old
right there, Ray
days.
Elgard and Rocky DiPietro.
Well,
Yeah.
and the thing with Ray Elgard though too was like he made a lot of tough catches in a lot of tough spots. So to play that long to get 13,000 yards is a son of a bitch tough thing to do. Like you got to
Man,
be a tough son of a bitch to do it. So, you
you
know,
know, I
thir-
remember watching him when he first came into the league and thinking, is he allowed to do that? Because he was just running, and there'd be like two guys literally clawing onto him as he's carrying them, running down like this is like nobody could tackle him. It was
but
incredible, and I kept thinking, how is that even allowed?
yeah, his yards after contact, right? It isn't like he
Oh,
broke
ridiculous!
contact to make the yards. He just carried them that far.
Oh, he fucking initiated contact. He said, "You
Yeah,
want to
there
get in
was
my way?
no
I'll fucking run you over."
like
And
if
he's
you
such
had
a
Ray.
good character too, eh?
He very much is, right? So, I mean, I was just going to say if you had him in like Madden, there would be no juke move. It'd be disabled for Ray Elgard.
Truck.
It's truck. Hey, what's this special move do? Truck. Hey, L1, truck. It's all truck. So,
And the
but
catch
I
and the
mean,
catch radius would be absolutely ridiculous, eh?
yeah, with some glass cutters on, right? So there we
Yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah.
I love
Taped
Ray
up
Elgard.
around the wrists.
But he played a tough in your face style, and to last that long and get those kind of yards through that area of the field playing that way, Ray Elgard, no doubt. I think consensus between all three of us.
Yeah, no
I
brainer.
I think anyone who says he doesn't deserve to be on this list can.
Kiss
We'll
my
meet him in an
ass.
alley somewhere. How's that sound? Ray
When I,
Elgard
Like,
style.
I'll concede that I give a lot of credence to the newer players just because some of them I would have seen, right? And
Yeah,
Ray Elgard, of course, is one of those, but still, he was head and shoulders above just about any other slot back who's ever played the position. I mean, he revolutionized. They don't call it the Elgard rule for nothing, right?
right. And then, in terms of modern game guys who played a little bit that style, I've always liked Nick Lewis. I think Nick Lewis is just the
Nick,
next
yeah.
iteration of Ray Elgard in terms of style. Like, go through the tough spots, make the tough catches. He'd pop you in the mouth and wouldn't think twice, right? Like, tough brand of football.
yeah.
So, and then
Yeah,
lasted that long to get those kind of yards. Like, the talent was there. So,
I'd put Thick Nick down as an honorary Canadian.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I
So,
like Nick.
and having said that, I guess we're done with receivers, though.
Moving on to
Good.
O
Moving on.
tackle.
Do you want to go from the inside out or
Okay,
left to
sure.
right,
Well,
or how do you got it
I've got him
here?
in. I've got him
Tackles.
going.
Oh, you got
Oh,
tackle.
I've got tackle next. So I
Okay.
went with.
Well, I
Well, we
think
all
we're.
went with the Walrus.
Yeah.
You had to go with Walby, and then
He's so decorated.
somehow Matt didn't go with Mean Gene,
I was trying not to be a homer. I had too many other homer picks.
and he went with Peter
And so I
Diakowski,
went with
which
I figured intelligence has to count for something too.
sure. Don't get me wrong. I like Peter Diakowski, but he's not Mean Gene.
I was reaching, but I thought Mikowski was pretty no brainer too. But again, I was really trying not to have consensus picks because that's just boring.
True.
Okay. I'll give you that. Yeah. And Diakowski was a very good player, so not
Well,
like
he
you
played
picked
for
a
us too,
bum or
so
anything.
you're
You
kind of
picked a
being
good
a
player
homer
for
anyways.
sure.
So.
Yeah, I mean, not much to discuss there. Those guys are just they're very decorated, surefire Hall of Fame kind of guys,
Who?
right? Very accomplished, even off the field.
Yeah.
One was a CBC broadcaster of games who, he did all right. He was okay. Kind of part of your childhood where you grow up and
Yeah,
you
I
remember
know.
listening to
I
games on
learned so
CBC,
many
right?
new words because of Chris Walby.
Hey, it's a learning experience, right? So
Oh,
there you go.
the classic
Walbyisms.
CBC days. Look at now. If you shut down the CBC, we wouldn't have got Chris Walby.
Well, back then it was worth watching.
It was the only thing on TV.
Well, there you go. There you go.
It's a good crack.
Anyway. But no, I mean, Gino, no brainer, right?
No brainer.
No
I
brainer.
Except for
agree.
So,
I agree.
and I don't care. You can call me a homer for that one. I dare you to go find somebody better. So.
Yeah, no, if I had those two guys as a quarterback, I'd feel pretty solid.
I might actually take a beer can out there and pop it off and have a couple pokes and then throw the ball. You might have that amount of time.
Moving on to center.
Moving on to center. Yeah, we got
a little bit of non-consensus, but you boys
Yeah.
picked Brian Chu, and I picked Tedder Ness, and I looked at Brian too, and
generations.
I could have picked Brian Chu too. He's as solid can be, but gotta take Teddy. He's meaner. And I heard
like that meanness.
Well,
eh?
I've heard so many great stories from my family about the good old days that you got to go with the old tough guys, man.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, Chu's a great center, but I don't think he's as tough. You need a tough center. Somebody's going to smash somebody.
And having one here, we had Picard before we had Clark.
I like Picard.
They play like he played that position like, there was a little bit of son of a bitch in his game,
like somebody in the nuts. Picard.
Yeah. But if no one's watching, it doesn't count as a penalty, right? Like, yeah. That's a man after my own heart. That's kind of how I played hockey for a lot of years. If no one's watching, it's legal, right? So their arm doesn't go up. It's still legal.
This is officially the longest a center has ever been talked about.
Yeah. Well, they're in the middle of it all. Anyway.
Yeah, no, my choice was between Brian Chu and Dan Clark, really.
And O'Day wasn't in your thoughts anywhere?
No, actually, O'Day actually is certainly would be up there just because of his longevity. Like, God, he played forever, it seemed. But I mean, no, Chu was just. I mean, yeah, he was there. He was like really the anchor of that really dominant Montreal line that ran Pringle to the record books, right?
But you look at how many years Calvillo never really had his toes stepped on, like clean pockets. Him and Fleury.
Oh yeah, they were.
Like they kept him pretty clean to make a lot of throws. So,
Yeah, and Fleury. Unfortunately, it was another one I wasn't able to pick just because I didn't want to pick a consensus.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, that's a good segue into the guards because, man, there were some good guards to pick from. But there had to be one consensus, just like me and Gene should have been consensus.
Oh, all-time tough, man.
Yeah, the pride of Gull Lake, Saskatchewan, Roger Aldag.
Yeah, old Roger Dodgers kids. My mother-in-law used to watch them, so for me, there's a little bit of extra connection. But I mean, everybody in Saskatchewan probably has a story about a guy like Roger Aldag being a Sasky boy and a Sask Rough Rider like he was. So, Roger Aldag's as tough as they come, man.
What shows me how tough he was is just how small he was, right?
Even he wasn't huge.
He's not a big dude.
Like short too, eh? Like,
yeah.
And it didn't matter. He still excelled at the top of his position year in, year out, year out. And that really shows a lot of dedication and character.
Well, and it shows a lot of like technical ability though too. Like, going back to just Gino. Gino wasn't a huge dude, but his footwork, he was a technician. Like he really knew how to play the angles in his favor and his footwork and everything else. So a guy like Aldag being a little smaller, he was scrappy, he was tough, but he also had to have the right footwork. He had to have that technical ability. So, hats off to him. But
for sure.
Aldag being a consensus on our list was not really a shock to me. So,
No, but our second guard is where we have a little bit of difference.
Yeah, everybody's got somebody different here.
So I went with Scott Fleury. I thought that was
not a bad pick at all.
Pretty much a no-brainer, but then you look at Matt's with Brendan Labatt, and you're like, well, it's like 1A and 1B kind of thing. And
Yeah.
And then you throw a whole different thing in there.
Gino Gurrell played 321 consecutive games. He won some awards. He won some Grey Cups. He's not maybe as current as the two guys that you guys listed, but you play guard the interior of the line for 321 games. You got some shit going on there, man. Like that's to
pretty
me
impressive.
Just the nature of the position, and then the consecutive games like that to me was pretty impressive stuff. So that's why I picked them for that reason. Flory and Labatt may have been better overall players, to some degree, a little higher talent, but hard to compare by era to some degree too. But still, I mean,
I don't think Flory missed too many games, did he?
321 consecutive is pretty good.
That's
300 games is hard to play.
That's pretty insane.
Yeah, never mind consecutive at a position like that too. So that's why I picked them, and maybe a little bit more of a throwback, old school kind of guy. So
nice. Well, I think any one of those offenses would be a pretty damn good team.
I think we all have a few guys on our offenses too that have that tough guy quotient. Like, I don't know if I'd want to play some of these teams in November because you get punched in the mouth by somebody.
That's my kind of football.
That's just
no
Canadian character, isn't it?
There you go, right? Whether it's that lead block out of a guy like Millington or trying to tackle a Cornish or a Harris, and then that's after you've dealt with those old linemen or a Ray Elgard blocking, like, holy shit, like. Ice up, boys. It's going to be a long night. So, anyway, let's get to the defensive side.
Well, yeah, speaking of tough guys, you guys picked the toughest safety I can think of.
Yeah.
So, for all the people who are not watching but listening, safeties where I picked Dale West and the two other gentlemen picked Mr. Glenn Suter. Don't get me wrong, I like Glenn.
I just love Suits. I could never pick anybody but him. Yeah, it's a homer pick, but I just love Suits.
But Suits did a lot of good stuff. He was an all-star,
for sure.
A Grey Cup winner. And honestly, if you listen to
he was an all-star ball holder.
He was.
Well, he should have got the long snapper.
Mom was a ball holder.
He could have got the long snapper instead of safety.
Instead of Heath's sister?
Dale West was way better.
Yeah, gotcha. No, the thing I liked
was more
about
impactful
too
to his
is
team.
you have a guy back there who really knew the game, and he really quarterbacked the secondary. Like, he was a smart dude, and you listen to him on TV. He does have some pretty good insights to the game on occasion too. So,
he's our Tony Romo.
He's our Tony Romo. Did you know Tony Romo's last contract in the NFL paid him, get this,
8?
I believe it was $13 million. He makes more per season calling the game now than he does playing the game.
Oh, less concussions.
And he's more likely now to go to the Super Bowl too. Anyway, yeah, I just saw that he makes more as a broadcaster than he ever did as a player, and you're just like, holy shit! Okay, good for him.
That's surprising though, because he's in a more exclusive club now, right?
Yeah,
there are many fewer broadcasters than there are players, right?
Well, and there's a pretty long list of choking quarterbacks too, right? Like, that's a long list, so. Dak will add his name next year.
That's right. Back to the CFL.
Back to the CFL, anyway.
So on to defensive backs, which I found that was the hardest to pick the players.
Chad's universal, though, eh?
Yeah, we picked 4 DBs each, and we were consensus picks on 3 of the 4. Those 3 are Davis Sanchez, Paul Bennett, and Larry Robinson. Those were pretty easy picks, and I'm telling you, my 4th pick was completely just looked at stats. I don't even know who that is.
All good, all good.
Yeah.
You got to
Yeah,
have
I'm
some
not
numbers to get recognized too. So,
Apparently, he played for the Stampeders.
ooh, see, you're a closet Stamps fan.
I
Hey,
love him.
that's
I
why.
love him, man.
Pulled it out. Pulled it
I
out.
think my fourth guy had 2 picks in a game once or something.
The hardest part with the Canadian DBs is it really wasn't a Canadian starting position for a lot of years.
Big time,
right?
eh? Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah, Canadian DBs play safety or special teams.
right. So it's maybe a little slimmer pickings than some of the other spots that are a little more traditional. Like O-line, I could give you 3 good O-lines of Canadians.
Oh God, yeah.
And only Canadians. So, but being a traditional spot. So
yeah, for sure. That's why it was
corners
harder.
and DBs in general, it's a little tougher because it's just maybe not as long of a list of guys, right?
Yeah.
So,
But Sanchez
Robinson
was an easy
was a
pick.
great player. Sanchez was a great player. Bennett was a great player. And yeah, from years gone by to some degree. I had Scott Flagel, but I mean, he's years gone by too, right? So, potentially, I think you're going to maybe start seeing maybe a little more Canadian kids playing some of these non-traditional
I do agree.
spots.
I see that changing a little bit. I don't know why that is, but I do see that trend.
Well, I think they're getting a little bit better in the CIS about, getting these guys a little bit more training, and they're a little more explosive, and they're starting even before university, let's face it, right? So, football programs are coming along in terms of their training, and that's part of it, right? So,
Yeah.
There's more DBs picked than I remember seeing in past drafts too with the CFL. So, you start looking at even the linebacker position. You'd get Canadian linebackers, but not every team has a Canadian linebacker. Now you start seeing guys like Cam Judge, who are not just a good Canadian linebacker, they're one of the best linebackers in the league.
That's a perfect segue into our linebackers.
Exactly. There you go. So, and we had some consensus there, I believe, with Mike O'Shea.
Me and Matt were on consensus 100%. And
I couldn't argue with those, Kyle. Like, I looked at yours and I was like, God, I want to pick somebody else, but I can't.
And our 3 were Mike O'Shea, Wayne Shaw, and Alex Singleton. And Mike O'Shea was consensus throughout us. And Heath had Larry Ruck and Kevin Iben, which were also fantastic linebacker picks. I'd take any one of those 6 guys.
So, I mean, you guys all know that
Singleton must have been hard to not take, though, Heath.
Yeah, but I genuinely don't like the Stamps, so it was easy for me versus a guy like yourself who loves them. But
you like the Evil Empire, apparently.
No, yeah, I do. I got to give them props. I mean, they win a lot of titles back in that day, so the old defense was pretty good back then. So, but no, with O'Shea though too, O'Shea and Iben, played right beside each other for a long time, and they complemented each other very well. So I didn't really want to pick 2 guys from the same team, but you're kind of like, you know what, if you got O'Shea, you may as well take the perfect complement to him. O'Shea was really good at taking on guards, and if he didn't make that first tackle, Iben was a little smaller, but he's a pretty athletic guy, and he could cover a little too. But I mean, he led the league in tackles, for I believe it was 2 years in a row. Actually, I think he set the tackle record in one of those years, or tackle record for that at that time, because he could just come in and clean up, right? Track whatever, O'Shea couldn't get to. So they complemented each other very well. I didn't want to pick 2 guys, but you're like, meh, yeah, here we go. And then my throwback guy. So, but Singleton's a hell of a football player. So I wish he was still in the CFL.
I wish he was a rider. He just seems like a rider. He's just a nice guy, but a hell of a football player.
Yeah.
Good dude.
He comes to work a little bit like, the old lunch pail kind of guy, right? So
seems more rider than Stamp. But moving on to our D line, starting with our defensive ends.
D line, there was not a lot of variety, was there?
This was pretty consensus. We all picked The Undertaker, Bill Baker, and everybody's favorite D end, Ricky Foley.
Yeah.
That was pretty easy.
Foley did pretty darn good, and he really flashed bright for a couple of years. He had some really wicked production, right? So
I still would have rather put
somebody.
I still would have rather put somebody other than Ricky, just because he just doesn't seem like he really belongs on one of those best of lists. But honestly, yeah, I was having a really hell of a hard time with that D line finding anybody outside of those guys.
Yeah,
at end especially.
Like Bill Baker was the no brainer.
Well, and how do you argue with a guy whose nickname is The Undertaker? Like, fuck. I wouldn't want to be
anybody that they have to change rules in the game for.
Yeah,
is on my team.
Bill The Undertaker Baker.
Agreed.
Like, holy, yeah. And championship pedigree, though, too, right? So, I mean, how do you argue with a guy who's that accomplished and has possibly the coolest fucking nickname in the game ever?
Yeah, and I think Foley's best years were not as a rider.
No, they weren't. His couple of years in BC,
he
was a productive, ratio breaker
for sure
for a lot of years.
I think his best years
those
were
couple of years
here.
in BC, he was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Like, he was pretty good. Brent Johnson being on the other end and stuff too. Like, they were a pretty good tandem. Cam Wake there for a bit. Like, yeah, they were pretty legit. So,
Yep. And moving on to D tackle. Well, we got one consensus in Dave Fennell. But looks like me and Heath took Doug Brown, and Maddie took the homer pick with Zach Evans.
And again, only to be
not Scott Schultz.
I never thought of Schultze. Jesus, I definitely would have put Schultze above
the Moose Jaw Mauler.
Sure. He's got more of a body of work for sure. Yeah, I never thought of Schultze for sure.
More of a body.
The fat, sassy pig.
Doug Brown was a beast, though, man.
I love Scott Schultz, man.
Me too.
He's a riot.
Who doesn't?
So,
yeah, no, I definitely would have. Yeah, changed my pick to Scott Schultz.
Well, Evans can get there yet. He's got some good years in him yet.
Yeah,
well, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, it was a total homer pick, but it was more just to avoid consensus and all. Like, because I'm going like, oh my god,
but
where do you?
Schultz was who he was because of who he had beside him. Doug Brown was a monster.
Oh, he was a monster.
Doug Brown was a half a D line himself. Like,
exactly. How can you not put him on your list?
No, Doug Brown's. Yeah. Could you imagine Doug Brown, Chris Walby going nose to nose? Those two bombers. Like, that's like watching a Ford and a Chevy half-ton just line up a block apart and go, we're just gonna pound the grills into each other's grills. Like, it's just, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
That's a big
old school. That'd be a big one. But Dave Fennell, though, too, another cool nickname, Dr. Death.
Yes.
So, I don't think I'd be a little scared of him.
Not a bad defense, guys. Not a bad defense. Once again, I think mine's tougher than yours, but
I think there'd be a lot of flags thrown potentially with guys like The Undertaker and Dr. Death.
Yeah, but eventually they're going to run out of players.
Larry Ruck, like Mike O'Shea, like I don't know. We got to have some, like, typical CFL. You got to have a good Canadian backup for every starter, because there might be a couple of ejections
that'd be
for
tough.
some of these guys potentially. So nasty. We breed them nasty in the north. So
and on to our last two categories. Well, our last category with our last two positions, kicker and punter. And I went with the same dude. I had to go with Louis. He's
just like that mustache.
He's Louis. He just did it all for so long, and I had to. And Heath went with Robo Kicker at his 65% accuracy. Isn't that funny? I think it was like 60-some% at that time, and he was considered Robo Kicker. Now, if you miss one kick in a season, you're probably going to lose your job.
I don't know. If your nickname's Robo Kicker, you got to be pretty goddamn good.
But
It's
just
I
how much
remember watching him kick 5 or 6 field goals in a game.
It's just how much the game's changed, though.
I believe he tied the record with one or two other guys for most field goals in a game at 8. 8 field goals, man.
Is it McCann?
Yeah, I remember. Dude, we had season tickets then. We could move the ball between the 20s like nobody's business. But there was zero finish on that team.
Like, yeah. Anyway, I'm looking up Dave Ridgway's all-time percentage.
And then Maddie also went with Robo Kicker.
Oh, yeah, I had to go with the homer pick. If you had put Ridgway, I would have put Pasaglia.
That's okay. And
I didn't have access to Heath's picks, so that's why I took that. But, yeah, I'm happy with
even though I
either.
went with Louis as the punter, too, your guys' punters are also fantastic. Bob Cameron with Heath pick and Hank Olisic with Maddie's pick. Those are also great picks.
Yeah. Hank Olisic was a legend at the position. And
I think Bob Cameron seemed to be able to kick, the best guy who could kick into the wind. I've never seen anybody punt into the wind like him.
It was his first kick, eh?
Even when he was like really old.
His first kick, he said, was at Taylor Field and went for negative yardage.
Yeah, but he learned very quickly.
Well, of course, because it's a little windier here, right? You know, Alberta sucks, Manitoba blows. That's why Saska's windy.
That's right.
So, all good. No, I mean, Hank Olisic had a bomb of a leg. So, and he played
as a kid.
Yeah.
Well, he started as a kid. Like, he was like literally like a junior, right? Like 16 or 17 or something, I think.
Yeah.
So anyone who can bomb it like that, I mean, right up there. And
then he came back again and played one game, an emergency game, when he was like 45 or something like that.
Yeah, and he didn't look half bad. I mean,
he was okay.
Who knows?
He could still kick the ball.
Lou is the model of consistency, though, too, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And longevity, yeah.
Exactly. And like Bob Cameron, the reason I picked Bob Cameron, I thought he played really good for a long time. He had 353 consecutive games. So that durability was also something that I considered. So
I saved a roster spot.
So where's your special teams guy? Where's your kick returner here? What's going on?
That's what I was thinking. We should have taken that one step further and had done a kick returner and a tackler and a blocker and a.
I'm sorry, I just came up with this.
Once
at the
we
last
get into
minute
special
to do
teams,
something.
then we can find a shitload.
Oh, we can find all kinds of Canadian special team stars.
Long snapper, gunner, holder.
Exactly.
Right on.
All good. No, actually, you know what? A pretty impressive list. Some positions, like we're just talking the kicker, punters, very hard to decipher. You know, there's a plethora of good answers for sure, good options. So, yeah, all good. No, it was fun.
So just to end off the show, the NFL lost one of their greats today. Don Shula passed away at the age of 90. I just got one quick question for you guys. Is he the greatest coach in NFL history?
No.
Who is? Is it Bill?
Yeah.
Who
did Bill overtake?
Wasn't he?
Shula's the winningest, but he's the only coach to coach to a perfect season. And he in 30, what was it? 31 years of coaching or 33 years of coaching. That's what it was. 33 years of coaching. He only had 2 losing seasons.
That's unbelievable. That's absolutely unbelievable. Pre-salary cap era, though, too, remember? So continuity may be a little easier. I don't want to take anything away from the guy, honestly, believe me. But a little bit hard to compare in some ways to other coaches, but
for sure, it was
ridiculously
just
accomplished.
More of just an interesting question.
He was, from what I heard, I mean, and all the recollections and talk of, you know, kind of his style. He was a pretty tough on players kind of guy. He liked a tough brand of football.
It'd be interesting to get the perspective from somebody who maybe grew up during those years. Like, they're not really our wheelhouse. Belichick's our wheelhouse years, right?
Yeah, and Belichick's, a little more so the modern game versus Shula, who was somewhat the modern game. It was, sort of between Belichick and Lombardi. I would say Shula, right? He's definitively in there, right? So, I mean, if you want to just get Belichick's thoughts even on Shula, it's on NFL.com right now. There's a really good story about it. So, I mean, Belichick's very respectful of the past. His old man being and him being an Army brat like that, that history is a big deal to him. So
yeah, his old man knew Shula. They went to school together or something.
Yeah. So, Shula's right up there with the best of them, if not the best of them. You could make a very good argument for him, but to me, Belichick just winning when it matters a little bit more maybe is kind of the thing, but a perfect season's a perfect season. You can't argue with it. So, I mean, you can't be wrong picking either one.
Yeah.
You really can't.
No, it was a big loss for the NFL today.
It was, and that's, pretty sad. Will a perfect season be done again, though? The Patriots, we're just talking about Belichick, very close.
Close, but didn't do it. I don't know. That's tough, man. That's...
Like, you're one hit away from your quarterback going down all season long. I mean, that's all it takes now is one tough hit, and your season's maybe a train wreck. Never mind lose a game, right?
Yep.
So
well,
maybe
Gord
the Cowboys
says that Gord says that Shula was a great coach.
Gord
says Shula was a great coach, but also had fantastic players, which I would argue Belichick had Tom Brady.
Right. Actually, well, that's what I heard, that Shula had coached 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks.
Yeah, maybe it's because he's a good coach.
Well, there you go. It's which is cause and which is effect.
I think you can have the best players, and if you don't have a good coach, you're screwed.
Coaching matters. It definitely does.
In a team sport, I think it matters a lot. I think you need a coach who can bring a bunch of different men together for a common goal is a special person.
Right. Yeah.
So anybody who can do that, in my books, and have that kind of sustained success, whether it's Belichick or Shula, that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, for sure it is. And if you like mentioning The Last Dance again, the Phil Jackson part, very cool. Like, if you've ever coached sports before, what Phil Jackson's able to do with that big of talent and ego
personalities,
and it's pretty amazing. Like, he's a pretty amazing guy. He's a good coach, but there's so much more that goes into it, and you don't really realize maybe, right? So very much hats off to guys like that. Don Shula, rest in peace, buddy.
Yeah.
Another little thing I wanted to mention too about the NFL is they just said that there's no games outside the UFC, continental USA this year. They're going to cancel all their international games, which I thought was a no-brainer. I kind of would have thought, when you're talking about your schedule and how you're going to do it, I think that's obviously the first thing. I would have got that out of the way maybe weeks ago, even at the draft. I mean, international travel's just forget it. It's not happening. So, they finally announced it today. So, but that being said, with starting the season, speaking of the Miami Dolphins again, they revealed plans that they were going to have fans in the stands for the start of the season. Not like they're talking start with empty stadiums. Like, game 1, they had plans that they revealed for potentially having fans in the stands. So who knows? It could be pretty wild. It could be pretty crazy. It could be just speculation that they maybe shouldn't have put out there, that, how it is. You throw thoughts against the wall, see what sticks, right? A brainstorming session that somebody wrote it down and it ended up in the media. So,
sure. But this is the same state that closed beaches too late and then yelled at their citizens for clogging up the beaches and then reopened them too early, right?
Yep. Florida.
But at the same time though too, and just to play a little devil's advocate on it though too, they said they don't even have 50% of the hospital's capacity being used right now. Like the hospitals are fairly empty. So it's not that they're thinking COVID's just going to go away. It's more the fact that, geez, if we got capacity to handle this, then let's go ahead and we'll handle it, right? Sort of thing. It's kind of strange because I mean, there's a couple of schools of thought with the whole thing though too, and
I sort of get where you're going from a logistical standpoint, but unfortunately, it's not merchandise where like that just-in-time model works, right? When you need to make sure all your capacity is full and you're not, everything's. It's just there's ethical things when it comes to people, right?
Right, and that's kind of the thing. I'm kind of torn between the two schools of thought in the fact that
I do understand where you're coming from.
Right, like they have the capacity, right? And people have to realize, because they keep, and I hate some of the news outlets and the way that they talk about it, only because I know what they're trying to say, but they use the wrong word, right? They'll come out and they'll be like, well, until we get a cure, there's no fucking cure. You're not getting a cure. It's influenza at its core. It's an influenza virus. There is no cure for any form of influenza.
No, there could be a vaccine for COVID.
Right. So, but, these media outlets and everybody's like, the fake news or, the misinformation, just use the right word. You could just take the time to be a little more precise in what you're saying, because like Maddie said, right? Like these health things, like there's impact to that. There's, so to me, don't say the word cure if you're a news outlet. It's a fallacy. There's no cure. It may go away. It'll be contained and dealt with better with a vaccine, but there's no cure.
The one that stands out for me is normal. Everybody says when we get back to normal, there will never, ever be a back to normal. Like things will change.
Of course.
We will never, ever go back to the way things were before this all happened.
They said that with AIDS. I'm sure they said it at the Spanish flu. It's a matter of what normal is, right? Like, I think we're going to fill stadiums with people again.
Oh, sure.
Yes, but things will be different. Things will be different.
Right. So your standards on cleanliness are going to just go up for sure. Like that's a definitive change that will be happening, that has already happened. And I don't see it going anywhere but forward, like more, right? It's going to happen more because of stuff like this. So, I mean, define normal. That's different to every single person.
Absolutely, yeah.
For sure.
So,
exactly.
To me, saying that in some regard is also a little bit of misinformation in the idea that normal's just a matter of perspective.
So normal's a terrible word for that. So the way things were are not going to be the same.
Yeah, that's one of my big triggers. Normal.
Yeah, like you're not
going to be normal.
So you're not going to resume the same comfort level maybe with your surroundings. Like there's different ways to maybe say it that are a little more representative of what it actually is. But I mean, normal, Jesus, like, yeah, it's slippery. But yeah, Miami trying to put a whole stadium of people in there. I mean, I'm of two schools of thought. Yeah, you got to be safe, but some of these people think we're just going to stay home and we're never going to get it. No, flattening the curve means not everybody gets it at once, but just as many people potentially are going to have to go through this for herd immunity or until there's a vaccine or whatever, right? It's being able to cope as a healthcare system is what part of this is. A large part of it is. So,
but Miami's just one stadium.
It is just one stadium.
And just one state, right? in one state. That's like, they're making it sound like the NFL's making it sound like, oh yeah, everything's on schedule. We're planning on starting on schedule with people in the stands. It's like California says there's nothing going on. So that's one giant state with how many teams? Like,
yeah.
And I would suspect New York's going to be the same way, right?
Well,
I mean,
and
I
that's
guess Cuomo doesn't have jurisdiction over it because it'd be New Jersey, right? But
well, I mean,
True. The stadium
you know,
is in New Jersey.
there's a number, 32 teams, and there's probably 25 states that are affected in some way, shape, or form because they have that NFL team there. I mean, it's almost the same debate as legalizing marijuana. Some states it's legal, some states it's not. They're going to have to figure out a way to navigate all the legalities of who can even play. Some states are going to be fine, some states aren't going to.
Right, but
Where are
if
you
you
going to
don't
go?
have
What are you
all
going
the
to do for an
states on the
alternative?
if you don't have all the states on the same page, how do you run a league though?
Well, that's sort
So
of the thing, and
say all of
I
the
have
states decide that they want to play except California. So do you not play with the Rams and and the Chargers?
potentially, I don't know. I mean, part of it is though too, and this is just me. Okay, this is my own little conspiracy theory of sorts, I guess, or my own little thought, is that I think Roger Goodell thinks that the NFL or him as commissioner have enough pull to phone a governor and get an exemption from the rules for his sport to play.
I think that'll work in some states, for sure.
I think he's naive as to what he's up against. He might get a couple to say yes, but I actually think he figures he's going to get him on the horn and be like, "Hey, I need an exemption. You're going to give it to me because this is how much business we do, and the profit from that in your community, blah blah blah." He'll give him the sales pitch, and he thinks he's going to get the exception. That's just my thoughts. I don't think everyone will give it to him, but I think somehow deep down he figures if he's got 50% of them saying yes, he can go make phone calls for the other 50%.
And that's just
Just me.
That's just the first speed bump in a bunch of other speed bumps. Okay, then you get that. Now,
Right, but
do you think 70 to 100,000 people are going to want to all sit in a stadium together? In some states,
maybe not.
maybe.
Some states,
Some
yeah,
states,
but
not.
it
Like,
it depends on the threat level, right?
there's so much
So I mean,
uncertainty that
just getting the opportunity to have people in the stadium is going to be his first obstacle, and in my opinion, it's extremely arrogant of him to
for
think
sure,
that he can pick up the
absolutely.
horn and influence a governor in that way, right?
mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, the president can't even get every governor to go and agree on stuff. He's leaving them to take care of their states as best they can for whatever their situation is, because the situation is different state to state. We've done the same. The feds haven't really done the emergency act where they got all the power because it's so different in Quebec versus Nova Scotia versus Nunavut versus Saskatchewan, right? Like, you can't make one set of rules that cover everybody because they're going to be unfair to somebody somewhere because they're in a totally different boat. I said last week, same storm, different boats. To me, Goodell, it's pretty goddamn arrogant if he thinks he can pick up the horn and get that kind of pull or influence
absolutely.
over a governor.
No, for sure.
Me personally, that is their biggest obstacle. The testing, the swabbing, the safety of the people in the stadium. I don't think he's going to get permission. I think the rest of it can be worked out. He needs permission. I don't know that he can get it. Not from all of them.
Yeah, I think it's an uphill battle.
Well argued.
I think it's very like I agree, very arrogant to be out there saying, "No, we're starting on time, everything as scheduled."
Well, just go and look up
I
Mark
guess you're the
Cuban's
only one who
opinion.
knows what's going on, Goodell, because nobody
Just
else seems
ask,
to know what the fuck's going on.
just go look up Mark Cuban, Mavericks owner, and his thoughts on the NFL and the Shield and just kind of the way they go about business. He's not a big NFL
He's
guy.
not a fan.
Well, it's that arrogance, right? We're the big dog. We're always going to be the big dog. You don't mess with the big dog, right? Like, it's sort of just that,
I
you
get
know,
that. I
he
get that.
doesn't quite get why they carry themselves that way because, it can slip away as fast as you got it. Let's put it that way.
For sure. But this has been a long
Anyway,
show. It's been a long show. Good show though. It was a fun show.
it's been fun. It's been fun.
Another week in the
Well,
books.
Yeah, it was challenging putting that list together. So
Yeah, well, we like to challenge you every once in a while, Matt.
I
We'll do
appreciate it.
we'll do a few more lists here in the next few weeks. How's that sound?
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Sure.
But until
Well,
next week.
I'll come up with something while I'm wiggling it on the rooftops.
Oh, mental picture. But thanks everybody for tuning in and hanging out with us. And
it was a blast.
We'll see you guys next week on the Above Average Shows podcast. As always, I'm Kyle. We got Heath. And we got Matt. And until next week, laters.
Laters.
Laters.